Thank you very much. You know, that wasn't really a suitable ovation for Al Jaffee. Let me give him the proper introduction and you give him the suitable ovation. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who's been working for Mad Magazine since the Paleolithic era, the creator of Snappy Answers to Stupid Questions and the Mad Folder, the 2008 Reuben Award-winning National Cartoon Society Cartoonist of the Year, Mr. Al Jaffee. Now that you've won the Reuben Award, have you won every important award in cartooning that there is?
Well, I think the Reuben was really the high.
No, we're going to top it. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the people who runs the convention, Mr. Gary Sassaman.
I think we've been trying to get Mr. Jaffee here for 39 years. This is the 39th year of the convention. I think we finally succeeded in getting him out here. And we want to honor his incredible career with the Comic-Con Depot Award for excellence.
Wow. I never expected this.
Get closer to the microphone.
Yeah. I wish I had a long list of people to thank, but I don't think you want to stay here for that list. I do have a long list of people to thank, and they were friends and they were colleagues, and I had good editors, and working with talented editors, I think, is a prerequisite of producing material that people enjoy. And I worked with Al Feldstein, at first with Harvey Kurtzman, and then with Al Feldstein, and I actually should have said with Stan Lee first, because that goes back so far to 1941. And they were all great contributors to anything that I accomplished, and of course it would all be meaningless if it wasn't for people like you, if it weren't for people like you who responded to our efforts, and I appreciate the totally unexpected round of applause that you gave me, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Now let me make a couple brief announcements. First of all, immediately following my talking to Al in this room, this very same room, we will have Mr. Al Feldstein with the rebuttal. And we'll be talking to Al Feldstein. You may want to just stay for that because they're two fascinating gentlemen whose careers intersected in many ways. Then tomorrow in this room at 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or as we call it, panel number 143. I'll be interviewing Al Feldstein, Al Jaffee, plus Sergio Aragones, and one of Mad's top writers, Arnie Kogan, will be sitting here talking about some of the glory days of Mad Magazine. So in light of that, I want to focus a little more on Al's pre-Mad work. A lot of people don't know that before he was a mainstay of Mad Magazine, he already had a very lucrative and successful career. Let's go back a bit, go way back here to your childhood. Tell me, where did you grow up? And get as close to the mic as you can, please. And excuse me, if any in the back, if at any point you don't hear us, give me one of these so I can do a Red Buttons impression.
Well, I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and moved to a small village in Europe where I grew to appreciate cartoons because my father, who remained in this country, I made him sign a blood oath that he would send me all the syndicated features, the daily and Sundays. And I sat and read them for hours and then copied them. And that's how, and I was probably around 7 years old when that started. And then I returned to this country in 1933 when I was about 12 and was fortunate enough to go to a high school, the High School of Music and Art, which Al Feldstein and Harvey Kurtzman and Will Elder all graduated from. And I fell in with this bunch of guys who wanted to be artists and cartoonists, and we just, you know, naturally gravitated towards the comic book field. And
Did you want to be a newspaper strip cartoonist at this point, or a comic book artist, or what?
I think every cartoonist aspired to be a newspaper cartoonist because it was steady work. Once you sold a feature, you just kept doing it 7 days a week, and the more papers you acquired, the more money you made, and they almost never canceled syndicated comic strips. So a lot of them, like Little Orphan Annie, went on for 50 years or more, and it's still running, being drawn by other cartoonists. So we all wanted to get into that, but they chose well, in order to sell a new comic strip, an old one had to be dropped out. And when newspapers did that, they got a lot of complaints. People were in love with the old one. So very few people could break in. And then along came the comic book industry and saved our lives because in the late 30s, you know, I saw the first one, I think, was Famous Funnies. And I saw that in 1933. Would that be right, Mark?
Not there yet.
In 1933, I saw the first Famous Funnies, and I thought, wow, this is where I'm going to go eventually. And in about 1941, I managed to sell an idea to Will Eisner, who was doing the Spirit at that time, and he needed comic relief. So I did Inferior Man for him. and at that point, I was sort of into the business.
Let me back up here. Did you have any heroes in cartooning when you were growing up? Anybody who I want to grow up to be Roy Crane, I want to grow up to be Chick Young. Anybody like that? Is there anybody like that?
Well, I would have loved to have been another Milton Caniff or Alex Raymond, but I couldn't draw as well as, if I stood on my head, I wouldn't be able to learn how to draw as well as they did. So I realized that my strong point was, if I had one at all, it would have to be comedy. And so that's where I went into that. But my heroes were guys like Alex Raymond, Milton Caniff, and of course a lot of the very funny guys like Otto Salvo did a lovely golden feature called The Little King, and some of the much older ones, Rube Goldberg, whose name has gotten into the dictionary and for whom the Rube in his name, He did Movement Nut, which was, I don't think there's a single person here who's old enough to remember it. And, but I thought it was very funny, and the Cats and Yarmouth Kids, those were the things that I loved when I was a child.
And so you worked for Will Eisner for a while, and then how did you get over to Stan Lee's place?
I took my meager portfolio over to Stan Lee, and I think it's called being in the right place at the right time. Stan Lee had just taken over the editorship of Timely Comics because Jack Kirby and Joe Simon were going off on their own. They used to be the two top people at Timely Comics. And Stan, who was then about 19 years old and I was about 20, anybody who came in, he grabbed and he said, "Can you do this?" And he threw a script at me called Squat Car Squad. And he said, "If you can do this, you can go on doing it." So I did it, and I had steady work. And he thought that was pretty good. And you have to realize that they were looking to put out as many titles as they could at that time because the business was booming in the 40s. So he said, create new characters. So I tried, he wanted some animal characters. And I thought that everything under the sun had been done. And I decided, I'll do something with a seal. And I created something called Silly Seal, and Stan suggested a sidekick, Ziggy Pig, so it became Silly Seal and Ziggy Pig. For a man my age to be sitting up here and talking to this it's really pretty wild. But there I was.
You were writing and drawing.
I was writing and drawing it, and the other ridiculous part of it is that the war was on the horizon, so here we had little animals who were fighting Hitler. And, you know, I mean, I remember one of my Silly Seal things where he created a U-boat out of ice and went to attack a German submarine. So, believe me, if the comic business wasn't what it is today, we all had a pretty good time doing it.
Tell us about, now were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted in the Air Corps, and
did you go in before Stan did or after Stan did?
I think I went in before he did. I went in August of 1942. I Stan went in afterwards, yeah.
And how long did you serve? Where did you serve?
3.5 years in a very, very dangerous place called the Pentagon. And it's still dangerous.
And you never saw any overseas action during this time?
I did not. Every time I was, my name was on a list to be shipped overseas. Someone in the Pentagon said, no, we need him here. For what reason? I said,
what were you doing there that they needed you so badly?
I was with the convalescent rehabilitation program, which had just been created by Colonel Howard Rusk at that time. And in New York City, there is a very, very important place called the Rusk Institute. He was my boss in the Pentagon, and my job was to create pamphlets to help wounded service airmen who were returning from the United States to readjust. Some of them had very serious cases of battle fatigue, and my job was to create these pamphlets that help them adjust to society back in the States.
And you got out, did you go right back to Timely?
Well, when the war was nearing its end, I wrote a letter to Stan Lee, and I said, I'm getting out pretty soon. He was out by this time. And I said, I think I'm getting out pretty soon, and you have a spot for me. And he said, come on over. And I joined the staff.
You've been freelance before that? Or
I was totally freelance prior to that, yes.
Okay, and you joined the staff, and what did they put you on at that point?
Pardon?
What did they put you on at that point? What did you do?
At that point, I started to do some teenage comics, one of which I remember called Genie. And then Stan Lee gave me something called Super Rabbit to do. Now, Super Rabbit, I'd hate to see him walking around here at the convention center because although I did introduce something into Super Rabbit, which I think superheroes achieved much later on, I try to write the stories of Super Rabbit from the point of view of his human, not human, but everyday problems. Such as getting into a battle and getting his uniform dirty and having to take it to the dry cleaners and not getting it back on time and being frustrated by the crimes that were going on and he didn't have a uniform and had to get something patched together. And so, but it was humanizing the superhero thing with a weird animal and trying to, see it from the point of humor, so the point of view of humor. Now you have to, I know you're here at a convention that's featuring really fantastic superhero writers and artists, and I'm taking you back to a caveman era in this business. And it really sounds pretty ridiculous. I know what I'm saying about Super Rabbit and trying to get his uniform fixed. But that's how it started. That's how we got into it.
In the time you were working for Timely, did they ever try you on writing superheroes or working on the adventure books?
I only did one straight story when Stanley asked me to do. Comics in the beginning went in waves. There would be the period of Little Animals, then Teenage, Archie comics, Patsy Walker, and so on. And then Westerns became very popular because television was showing old Westerns. And then crime came in. So Stan asked me to do a crime story, and I did a Bonnie and Clyde type of thing. But unfortunately, I'm not a very good straight artist. I'm I could struggle through and do a credible job, but there were so many talented people out there who could do it much better. So I told Stan that it's a bit of a strain for me to do something that's not comfortable for me, and I'd rather do humor. So he gave me Patsy Walker to do, which was a teenage strip that I enjoyed writing, penciling, and inking.
All right, now I want to take a minute here. I'm going to name some people who worked for Timely during this period. You tell me if you remember anything about them, if you knew them, or if you got any anecdotes. If not, we'll just pass. Sid Shores.
Sid Shores was a very serious guy who worked in the serious guy department. The serious guy department, Timely Comics was split down the middle. Sid Shores and the rest of the guys who were doing Captain America and the Human Torch and Submariner and so on. That was one place. Then the Crazies, which was Mike Sikowski and me and Edwin Yarsky and a number of others, were in the the silly stuff, the animals and the teenage stuff. And we were in another area, and the serious department looked down upon us as being sort of a group of kindergarten guys, and we saw the serious guys as a bunch of stuck-up people. So, but Sid Shores was a very nice fellow, and he was a good artist, and I was shocked recently to find out that he had, when he was no longer involved in comics, he was driving a taxi cab in New York. But he did a very nice Captain America, and I think his problem was when Timely Comics decided that they couldn't afford to keep a staff of 50 people or so and pay their health insurance. Someone came up with the great idea of making us all freelance and letting us pay our own health insurance. So Sid Shores was very slow, and once he was turned into a freelance guy, doing half a page a day just didn't cut it. I mean, I think he must have had a tough time making a living. While on the other hand, people like Mike Sikowski, who did 12 pages a day, was rolling in money. So freelance life changed things for all of us.
I asked you on the Golden Age panel to tell us a Mike Sikowski story. Got another Mike Sikowski story? Mike was my dear friend. He was a man with a wicked sense of humor, and he was the fastest artist comics have ever had, just about. He tended to yell at people or do very angry things to them. He didn't like.
That's true. On the previous panel.
He also was known to take the occasional drink.
Yes, Mike took an occasional drink that was about 7 feet high. And I would join him, but I certainly never tried to keep up with him. On Fridays after work, we went over to a favorite place called the Whaler Bar, and Mike and Klein and a few others.
George Klein?
George Klein. They enjoyed the imbibing, but I had to drive a car out to Long Island, so I couldn't stay with them. But
it was said that no female employee of the company was safe from the charms of Mike Sikowski.
yes, and he particularly had a passion for a lady cartoonist named Violet. I don't remember her last name.
Barclay.
Violet Barclay, right. She changed that name later on when she became freelance. She was a very attractive lady and a very good cartoonist, but I lost track of her after we went freelance. However, Mike had a very, he was a kind of a hyper guy. To watch him draw, if you think Sergio is fast, Mike was just as fast, but while drawing Captain America, penciling Captain America. So it was really amazing to watch somebody draw straight characters with such speed. And I'm told that Jack Kirby was that way, but I never saw Jack at work. Anyhow, Mike got. Are any of you familiar with Alan Bellman? He was.
Alan was a guest here, mentioned a year or two ago.
Well, Alan Bellman was a very young guy, and Alan started out. He must have been 17, 18 years old when he started doing cartoons. And he would visit our room, and Mike disapproved of his attire, and the fact that Alan would very often wear the same clothes for a period of time. And so Mike took after him, and he started doing a series of cartoons and pasting them up on the wall, and it would show Alan Bellman getting out of the bath, and the bath is black. And he just kept on mercilessly doing these things and tagging them. I think he almost reduced poor Alan to tears because it was relentless. But they were very funny, you know. Well, you know, funny is funny. Sometimes people say, you know, this, ha ha ha, this is in bad taste. But meanwhile, they're laughing. But Mike made life very lively in our room, and I enjoyed his company. He could be very mean, and he could be relentless, but he was a terrific artist, and he was very nice to the people that he liked.
Did you have any contact with Martin Goodman?
Yes, I had contact with Martin Goodman. Not close contact, but I can remember an anecdotal story if you're interested.
Martin Goodman owned Marvel Comics, so Timely Comics. Yes.
Yes, he was a quiet man, and he tended to stay in the background and let Stan Lee and an assistant of his, Robbie Solomon and Mike Torpy, handle the cartoonists. And they came up with, in order to please Martin, they would come up with all kinds of wild ideas about how to get more productivity out of us. One of which was a long whip. But no, seriously, they marched up and down to make sure everybody was working all the time. I think they were aspiring to have something like a factory in Thailand where we would be turning these pages out one after another. But when Stan made me an associate editor of the humor department, Teenage and Humor, I received a bunch of scripts, and I read them, and I turned to my assistant, Lazarus, and
Leon Lazarus?
Leon Lazarus, and I said, Leon, I think these are terrible. You look at them, and he agreed they are terrible. So I turned them down. And the next thing I hear is you have to go into the front office and your ass is on the line. So I went in there, and I saw Stan Lee, and I said, Stan, what's this about? He said, well, those scripts you turned down were written by Mrs. Martin's friend, a very close friend who wants to be a comic book writer. So you'll have to face Martin Goodman. So I faced Martin Goodman, and I said, Mr. Goodman, these are terrible scripts, and you should read them. And after you read them, if you want me to buy them with your money, I will be very happy to do so. And he said, I'll read them. And then Stan came back later and said, forget about
it. During this period, a man named Harvey Kurtzman was doing some stuff for Timely, his Halo strips. Did you have anything to do with that?
I did not have anything to do with that, but I can tell you this, that many, many wonderful freelance cartoonists came through Timely every day to deliver work. And we all admired their work. Some of it was really superb, like Dow, you know Dow. I think the years have kind of dulled my memory, so forgive me.
Vic Dow.
Vic Dow.
Vic Dow, that's correct. And Stan Drake, and I mean really wonderful work that came in. And but when Harvey Kurtzman came in to deliver Hey Look, we all jumped up and ran into the editor's office to look at it over his shoulder. There was something about Harvey's work that just had, it was magnetic. The Hey Look things were so inventive and so different, but we never thought at that time that Harvey Kurtzman would go on to do anything of any particular importance. That this is what he did, these one-page funny things, but which we all admired.
Did management at Timely know what they had there?
No, I don't think so. What they tried to do is I think Stan, of course, who was the top editor, tried to get Harvey. He liked Harvey and he liked his work, and he said, "Look, we'd like to do a complete comic book that you could take over, and you would write it and you would draw it. But you can't do it in the style of Hey Look, because that's something a little too sophisticated. What we really need is for this book to be like Blondie, the comic strip Blondie." And Harvey at the time needed to make a living, and so he desperately tried to copy the Blondie style, and wound up in a straitjacket. Harvey was an original. He was not somebody who could be turned into a different cartoonist. He had to be Harvey. And of course he went on to be Harvey, very successfully doing war comics and working in the EC stable.
Now you stayed with Timely through what year?
I was on staff with Timely from 1945 to about 1950.
Okay, and then you went freelance with them.
And I went freelance, and Stan handed me a teenage comic strip called Patsy Walker, which happened to be selling fairly well at the time.
Was it this one been taken over from, was it Morris Weiss who was doing it before, or?
No, not Morris Weiss. I think Christopher Rule. Yeah, Christopher Rule was doing it. It was created by a lady whose name I can't remember, but she didn't do it very long. Chris did it, and but they had various writers, and the thing never gelled. And Stan said to me, take it over and turn it into something that's interesting to the reader, the way the Archie fans feel about Archie. So I took it and I did my best. It did start to sell, and then Stan said, well, at first it was just Patsy Walker, and it was Patsy and Hetty, and then it's Patsy and the Man in the Moon. I mean, it just new titles. I was doing 2 or 3 of them a month, writing and penciling and inking them, and I was about ready to get into Harvey's straitjacket.
Did you feel your career had taken a wrong turn at this point? Creatively, at least?
I never had a real goal, to be honest with you. I have to confess that drawing pictures was a very pleasant way to make a living, even if you were killing yourself doing it. And I'm still doing that. Maybe it's the key to longevity, though, who knows? But I must honestly say that I didn't have a passionate direction of any sort. If I could draw as well as Alex Raymond or Milton Caniff, I would have tried very hard to join, that highly respectable group. But I was a little funny stuff, silly stuff.
When Kurtzman and Elder were doing Mad with Jack Davis and Wally Wood, and that came out, did you feel like, hey, I should be over there?
I didn't, but Harvey did.
Okay, and Harvey?
And Harvey wanted me, and of course, he couldn't offer me any kind of financial inducement to match what I was making with Timely doing Patsy Walker. But later on, I did go with it.
Well, when Mad went from a comic book to a magazine, Harvey was having trouble getting the issues done, and he came to you and he indicated he wanted you to come over there, and finally you agreed to join him.
That's correct, yeah.
All right, now I know you told this story the other day, but tell again, you finally gave up Patsy Walker.
Well, I was grinding out Patsy Walker and paying the mortgage pretty regularly, and so things were going along very, very well. And well, I might as well tell the real story. I was working through the night for 2 weeks. It seemed like I didn't have any sleep at all. I had to get 2 comic books done, and to be honest with you, I don't even know when I started, and I don't know how I finished, but I had the 2 comic books done on a certain morning, and I drove in to New York, very groggy, with very little sleep, and delivered it to Stan, and things were kind of swimming at that point. I really shouldn't have even driven in under those circumstances, but I had to make my deadline. And as I mentioned before, Stan just accepted my work without looking at it at that point. I don't know if he ever looked at it. I think he probably just turned it over to Bonnie and said, read this and see if it's okay. But this particular morning, now Stan also was a teaser. He would make teasing remarks, and most people grew used to it. You knew that he wasn't serious when he was saying something that seemed like it was deprecating, like such as, "Don't tell me you brought that junk in again," you know, something like that, you know, with a smile on his face. But at this point, he whipped out a page of teenage comics that someone had submitted. I think it might have been Joe Neely. Did he take over Pepsi Cola?
No.
Maury Weiss took it over.
Morris Weiss took over.
Morris Weiss took it? No, I think it was someone else. I think
Okay, he whips out a page of teen comics.
No, he took out this page, and it was beautifully drawn. Not in the Morris Weiss style. It was drawn by somebody, you know, of the quality of Coletta or you know, but he had not been working for Timely at that point. But he showed me this page, and he jokingly said, "You better look to your laurels. Look what just came in." And it was, I think it was a sample of Patsy Walker. So I was so tired, I said, "Well, then why don't you give it to him?" And I left. When I got home, my wife at that time said, "Stan has been calling to tell you that he was really just kidding around, and he's not serious about it." And I called up Stan and I said, "Well, thanks for calling, but I think it's time for both of us to move on. You have somebody who can do it very well, and I've done it for 5 years and I'm tired." And I had an offer a while back from Harvey to come on to Mad. So I decided maybe this is the moment. And Stan and I were very friendly about it. He said, "Okay, Al, you know, if you feel that this is the way you want to go, I mean, you're absolutely welcome to continue." So I said, "No, let's call it a day on this." And I called up Harvey Kurtzman and I said, "Harvey, I'm coming on board with Mad." He said, "I just quit Mad." So I said, "Well, I now know what it's like to be high and dry." I said, "Harvey, you know, I burned my bridges behind me." And he said, "Don't worry, something's going to happen." He's very secretive about these things. So he said, you just sit tight and everything will be all right." And about a week later, he called me to tell me that Hugh Hefner was financing a magazine called Trump, and that I would be an associate editor or something. And you know, they made me an offer, and I joined.
Now, I want to ask something here. It's a little complicated question here, but I'm really interested in this. A few months before this, Mad was selling quite well, but its distributor went bankrupt. Leader News, which had been distributing EC Comics and some other things, went bankrupt. And all of a sudden, Gaines was in tremendous financial trouble because he had no distributor, and no other distributor would take him until he cleaned up the debt that Leader News had left behind, which was not his debt. He had to pay his distributor's debt. Harvey convinced him to sink some of the family money, about $50,000 to $75,000, into paying this off. Kurtzman said, "I can make Mad work. You've got to, you know, just keep in there and keep it going." And Gaines said, "Okay." Gaines got his family to chip in, and they invested an additional sum of money in Mad, and Mad was still being very profitable. Then one day, probably about a week or so before your conversation with him, Kurtzman goes to Gaines and says, "I want to renegotiate a deal. I want 51% of the magazine, or I quit." Gaines said, "I can't give you 51%. Kurtzman and he parted company. Now, it has been suggested by the gentleman coming into this room after you that Kurtzman already had a deal in place with Hefner. He was looking for an excuse to get fired. He didn't want to go to Bill and say, hey, I know I didn't actually invest in that, but I'm quitting and going to work with Hefner. Mr. Feldstein suggests that this 51% offer was Kurtzman's way of getting out of his deal with Gaines, going off and taking what he thought was a more lucrative, promising offer with Hugh Hefner, which turned out not to be, because Trump only lasted 2 issues. Do you have an insight into this? Do you have an opinion?
Well, I really, it would be very, very unfair for me to get into this because I was not involved in that in any way at that time. The only involvement I had with Harvey was in the story I just told prior to this. And Bill, I mean, I heard things after I joined with Harvey to work on Trump. I heard little bits and pieces about what had happened from various people. And I really didn't know who to believe. I didn't know Bill Gaines. I knew Al Feldstein because I would drive Al Feldstein home from a National Cartoon Society meeting because we both lived out on Long Island. So I barely knew Al Feldstein, but...
Well, we barely knew Al Feldstein. We just walked into the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Al Feldstein. So why do you think Trump didn't go?
Al, be careful what you hear. Touche. I've heard various stories about why Trump failed. And I honestly, I feel gossip is, while it's interesting, is not reliable. What I heard from Harvey and various people involved with the dropping of Trump magazine was that Hugh Hefner had overextended his bank loans for Playboy and was financing the Playboy clubs and was financing Trump magazine and was financing his mansion.
He had a magazine called Show Business Illustrated also.
Yes, I mean, he was, what I heard was that he was financially overextended to the bank, and the bank said, you got to drop some stuff in order to be, viable. And Trump was one of the things they decided to drop after 2 issues. Subsequently, a year or 2 later, I was invited to a Playboy party and I came to this party and met a lot of old friends there. And one of them was Playboy's financial officer. And I got to chatting with him. We were having...
Was this Arthur Kretschmer?
No.
It was Paul? It doesn't matter. I'm sorry.
No. His name will come to me, but it's somewhat irrelevant. But because I said to him, too bad that you had financial problems that resulted in the death of Trump, because we were really, I think, on the way to making a good magazine. He said, we didn't drop you for financial reasons. We dropped you because we realized that Harvey was never going to get the issues out on time. And that kind of rang a bell that resonated as far as I was concerned, because I remember being at Harvey's house one day delivering my work for Trump, and the telephone rang, Harvey answered, and he was on the phone with Will Elder. Will Elder did wonderful work, but he was meticulously slow. And I heard Harvey's side of the conversation was, but Willie, we have to get it by tomorrow morning. No, next week is too late. We must get it by tomorrow morning. Yes, I want a good job. Yes, it has to be a good job. But by tomorrow morning, if we don't get it by tomorrow, if we get it by next week, it will cost Hefner a couple of $100,000 in the printer's schedule, just sitting there waiting for the copy. Yes, I'm okay. We'll wait for it. We want a good job. Well, I believe that Hefner's intent eventually was to have Trump become a major magazine. The production was very similar to Playboy's production, very high class reproduction in lots of color, and which was unique at that time. Mad was black and white, and holding up a printing press that's set to print in color is very expensive every day. So the ultimate goal was to make Trump a sister magazine to Playboy and be able to sell advertising in Trump the way Playboy carries advertising, and make both magazines very profitable. But you cannot sell advertising to a magazine that's going to come out every 5 weeks, every 6 weeks. It's supposed to be a monthly. And I mean, it took us forever to produce the first 2 issues. And that's what the financial guy, explained to me was the reason for the demise. Now, I don't know which story is the real story. I'm just telling it to you the way I heard it.
Well, now, Al went on to work with Harvey Kurtzman on Humbug, and then he came back to Mad, and we have now reached the point where we can continue this discussion on the Mad panel tomorrow at 3 o'clock in this room. And my goal now is to get the people who are leaving out of the room and get Al Felton up here so I can get Al's career up to the same point. So tune in tomorrow, and would you join me in thanking Mr. Al Jaffee?
Thank you, you were all great.
If you are leaving, leave through this way. If you want to stay for Al Felton, grab the seat up front.